Waiting for the last 10 minutes, the gentleman who we have a thirst to hear from because of Marianne Hamore's presentation. When John Love was a teenager, he was very curious why some people succeeded and some didn't. After college, he went on a lifelong quest to find out how to achieve success. He has read over 85 books on achieving success. Most of these books he has read 3 or 4 times. He has attended many seminars on how to achieve success and has listened to thousands of hours of CDs on the subject. He has also read many articles and sat down with numerous successful people and asked them how they did it. Tonight, John will share with you some principles on achieving success, as well as the first order of achieving success. Please help me welcome Toastmaster John Love.
Thank you, John. Mr. Toastmaster, Toastmaster family, and welcome guests. Over the last 6 years, I have spoken with you a number of times on how to achieve success. And we were talking tonight about what would $1 million speech be to you. $1 million speech would be to me if I said something and some member of my audience was so inspired that they went on to achieve great success and became a millionaire. That would make me a $1 million speaker. What I want to emphasize tonight is what I call the first order of achieving success and what it can do for you and what it should do for you. What I mean by the first order is the very first thing that achieving success should accomplish for you and what it should. Let me start by sharing with you a study that has been done over and over again for years and years. That study seeks to find what percentage of the people in this country are highly successful. Study after study after study has come back. The conclusions are that 5% of the people in this country are highly successful. If 5% of the people in this country are highly successful, then wouldn't it stand to reason that 95% are not? In 1854, Henry David Thoreau published his book titled Walden. In it, he made his famous statement. He said, most people lead lives of quiet desperation and die with the music still in them. As early as 1854, Henry David Thoreau nailed it. The 95% that he's talking about, or the most people that he's talking about, are the 95%. 95% lead lives of quiet desperation and die with this music still in them. My wife's grandfather used to have this expression. He used to say, poor people have poor ways. How do you like that? Poor people have poor ways. Can anybody dispute that? And if poor people have poor ways, wouldn't it stand to reason that average wage earners have average ways and highly successful people have highly successful ways? I'm reminded of what the comedian Jeff Foxworthy says. He says for a retirement plan, most people have a 401k. Rednecks play the lottery. Poor people have poor ways. The word ways means actions. Poor people have poor actions because poor people make poor decisions. They make poor choices. Since thinking is the forerunner of all action, poor people think in such a way as to have poor actions, thus keeping them poor. And if poor people have a poor method of thinking, wouldn't it stand to reason that average wage earners have an average method of thinking and highly successful people have highly successful thoughts and actions? Well, I realize that my words might be offensive to some of you. And if you find what I'm saying offensive, stay tuned. It's about to get worse. Like myself, most of you were born to the 95%. And like myself, most of you were raised by the 95%. Your aunts and uncles were members of the 95%, and so were your grandparents. The parents of the children that you played with were members of the 95%. And today, probably most of your friends and co-workers are members of the 95%. If you were born to the 95% and have been surrounded ever since by the 95%, you are on what I call a 95% maintenance program. And folks, if you're on a 95% maintenance program, you are not playing follow the leader. You're playing follow the follower. playing follow the followers. As card-carrying members of the 95%, you have been inundated and saturated with the thoughts and the philosophies and the mindsets and the mentalities of the 95%. And your head has been filled with things that are just false and erroneous. For example, you've heard all your life that the opposite of success is
Failure.
and that's not true. Failure is a very, very, very necessary ingredient of achieving success, so much so that it becomes part of the foundation of achieving success. You've never met a winner that hadn't lost a few. Let me give you another example. You've heard all your life that you're successful because you make a lot of money. You don't make a lot of money because you're successful. You're successful because you make a lot of money. No, you're not successful because you make a lot of money. You make a lot of money because you're successful. Now you're sitting there going, huh? You're not successful because you make a lot of money. You make a lot of money because you are successful because you succeed first with what you are. You succeed second with what you do. Another example, and I love this one. You've heard all your life people saying, I used to hear my mother say this all the time, money can't buy happiness. Right. Arnold Schwarzenegger says money can't buy happiness. He said, I have a net worth of $50 million. I was just as happy at $48 million. Or as I like to say, money can't buy happiness, but it will lease it for short periods of time. The 95% say that money can't buy happiness, and they're absolutely right. You just cannot go down to the happiness store and walk in the front door and buy yourself a box of happiness. But I believe what the 95% mean when they say money cannot buy happiness is that money cannot bring happiness. And how ridiculous is that? So ridiculous that I will not argue it much. But what I will argue is its opposite, is that a lack of money will bring misery. You succeed first with what you are. You succeed second with what you do. That is the first order of achieving success, and that is the sequence. And you know what a sequence is. Before you go after the next thing, you must first accomplish the first thing, the thing that comes before it. I mean, could an engineer go and get a job at an engineering company as an engineer before getting a degree? Of course not. And even after he got his degree and became an engineer, could he or she succeed if they weren't punctual? If they worked, less than 10 hours a day, and you might be saying, well, John, the average person works 8 hours a day. Anytime I hear somebody say, the average person does such and such, a little bell goes off in my head and I think, ding, maybe that's why they're average. Not only must you be punctual and work 10 hours a day, but you should leave your personal needs at home. Maybe you have this need to entertain, or maybe you have this need to talk. Leave it at home. 20 years ago, I had this employee named Ruthie, and Ruthie loved to talk. She would go from cubicle to cubicle, bending people's ears, especially when I wasn't there. Over a 2-year period, I warned her 3 times about her nonstop talking. The last time I warned her was in writing, and I made her sign it. And after that, she went stone cold silent. Would hardly speak to anybody when she came in the office. Wouldn't speak to anybody when she left. Thus putting a lot of tension in my office. But over a period of time, she returned to her nonstop talking, and I had to fire her. She used my business to fulfill her social needs. Leave your personal needs at home. I know that's hard because they say that, you can go anywhere you want to go, but you'll always take you with you. But leave your personal needs at home. 2 things I want to share with you before I wrap it up. Number 1, and this is to make a more successful you, lose the television. 2 studies I've read says that the average person watches 4 hours of television a day. What did I just say? The average person watches 4 hours of television a day. Ding! Maybe that's why they're average. In its place, read books on achieving success. You have been inundated and saturated with the thoughts and philosophies and mindsets of the 95%. Now it's time to be inundated and saturated with the thoughts and philosophies of the 5%. Leave your personal needs at home. Always be punctual. Lose any kind of attitude and never forget, you succeed first with what you are. You succeed with what you do. Mr. Toastmaster?